This is the Big Jim Show.
I'm joined by, I'm not saying this, a lot of people say this, that you're a divisive character in rugby, but you've won a Rugby World Cup as assistant coach with the Springboks, coached England and Australia to Rugby World Cup final, won 2 Six Nations titles, amongst many other things. It's great to have the great, the powerful, the wonderful Eddie Jones.
Thanks, Jim.
How
Good
are
on
you?
you, mate. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's cool to have you. So last time we were together was in Japan, in your home country of where you now live. It was brilliant. It was... I had a wonderful experience. It wasn't even a year ago. It was back in April. And I never met you before. That was the first time,
true.
literally, in a park in Tokyo where I met you. That was really cool.
Bit different here, mate. Bit colder. But yeah, that was fun actually, walking around the park. And I enjoyed that little chat with you. So it's good to be here today, mate.
Yeah, different way of doing things. I think that was the feedback we get. Well, we get from different people, right? I mean, it's not a new format. Gary Neville does it with the overlap. But actually, you think about how that conversation format unfolds, right? People go for a walk around the park, or you go for a walk with your mates and you chat. And it was cool.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we've used various consultants in various teams, and one of the advices they give, if you want to have a conversation, go for a walk. And I think, it's such a natural way. That's how people used to communicate a lot. So it's a good way of doing a podcast, mate.
Yeah. And how are things with you then? So Japan, a bit of a real rebuild process going on there. The PNC, you're involved in that. Some tough results, but it seems like it's going okay at points, but it feels like it is a bit of a rebuild over there for you.
It's a massive rebuild, mate, which is okay. I think the hardest thing about a real rebuild is meeting expectations. We've got a side of 200 caps, and certain people expect us to be at the 2015, 2019 level now, but with 200 caps, it's going to take some time to build the experience. And I think the interesting thing about the game at the moment, I reckon the game hasn't changed. Hasn't changed since you played, hasn't changed since I played. There's nuances that's changed in the game. But I reckon the biggest thing that's changed in the game at the moment is the intensity of the contest. And so what does that put a lot of stress on? Your decision-making of your senior players. And I reckon that's why the experienced teams now are standing out. You look at Ireland, they bring 500 caps off the bench. Everyone's criticising Steve for his comments. But he's right. They bring 500 caps on. They immediately know they roll. They don't drop. The intensity of the team doesn't drop. In fact, it might even raise a little bit. And therefore, they keep going and England drop off. And I reckon you see that with South Africa. They're generally 1,000 caps now. And they've got that consistency. Who's the two most consistent sides in the world? South Africa and Ireland. And there's success leaves clues, and that's one of the clues they're leaving.
Yeah, with Argentina as well, though, the high-level games that they're playing, and you saw when they went into the championship that they were getting smashed every week. Yeah. But there's no coincidence now that they're at the top table now.
Same again, and Scotland's another good example, mate. You think about, Gregor Townsend's probably been there 6-7 years.
Yeah, yeah,
and
8 maybe. Yeah,
and in reality, the team hasn't changed much. There's still there's been in and outs, obviously, but they've got a pretty consistent format. Sort of Jack in the box 9, Finn Russell at 10, big fast outside backs, couple of big locks. Fetchers in the back row, and their front row's improved over time. And now they've got a pretty solid team, which, 6 or 7 years ago they didn't. They were an up and down team.
So when you look at the teams now, and there is a goal physically, it feels, but also strength in depth. You referenced Steve Borthwick's comments there, but it is an obvious one. You look at South Africa, the All Blacks are in a little bit of a rebuild. Australia obviously in a rebuild as well. But we're in the middle of the Six Nations, and it feels like there is a gulf, and we're recording this before England play France, and a lot of people are thinking that France are going to beat England. Why are you seeing a gulf between the likes of France, Ireland, South Africa, New Zealand, just to name them 4 teams, and then everyone else?
Well, I think, there definitely is the experience, and I think with this experience comes that hardness in the contest. Because if you think about the contest for the ball now, how hard it is, it's physically hard. And if I'm coming in to clean out you and I'm a half a yard off now, you win the ball, right? And that sort of accuracy and that ability to keep doing it generally comes with experience. Doesn't always have to, but generally comes with experience. You make a few mistakes and you don't make those mistakes. You've got your players like your Owen Farrell who come in at 20 who are the most experienced players, But generally speaking, it takes a guy maybe 20 tests to get used to to test match intensity, and then they start to flourish.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing, and I think they've all got really clear ways of how they want to play. South Africa's high kicking, counter attack now with particularly the new generation of players coming through. France up the middle, and then you got Dupont who can play a little bit, who looks for space on the outside with his kicking. Defensively very well organised, and then you got Ireland, who are the most cohesive side in the world. Try to outphase you, so they're really clear. And I think the teams who are trying to catch them are trying to work out which is the strength of our game. Like England's gone to the high kicking game, a lot of kicks, which is probably right for them. But then the media don't like that in England. But then the media don't like it when they don't win. So, it's one of those really difficult things for England, particularly where the media pressure is probably higher than any other world. New Zealand's probably, as you said, going through, do they go back to their high-kicking game, counter-attack, or, Ray, as a young coach, might want to play a bit differently. But all the stats show, and the game's always been the fact that if you get up the other end of the field quicker than the opposition, you'll generally win.
Yeah, so out with them four, you mentioned the two there, England and New Zealand, and there could be an argument for Australia as well, but they've been, as you know, better than me and most. They've been in a big rebuild. But the expectation of England fans and All Blacks fans expect them to be in that top four with them in the top six.
So there's no process there for those two teams, mate. You can't have process with those two teams. You just got to win. And that's the difficult thing where you have to go through. The reality is you have to go through a process to win. Yeah. Like you just don't jump there straight away. And England, it's been a difficult period for 3 or 4 years now where, for that period up to 2019, we had a exceptional team, and you played with a lot of those blokes at Sarries, and they were the basis of, the strongest English team in Europe for a long period of time. And you lose those guys, there's a gulf, and the young guys have come through, but they probably haven't filled the gap as quickly enough. So you've still got a little bit of gap there. You've only got, of the really senior players now, Itoje, Slade, who else is there? Genge. There's not too many others.
They're not rolling off the tongue, are they?
They're not rolling off the tongue. And then there's a big gap to guys. And then you go to your Marcus Smith, who's 40 caps. And there's not too many other players around that mark where there should be. Your Chesham's had a lot of injuries. Tom Curry's had a lot of injuries, hasn't played. Will Stewart hasn't played a lot of test match rugby, so you got that bit of a gap there, and that's what Steve's trying to fill, and he's got to fill it pretty quickly.
How do they close that gap then?
Oh, you just got to stick at it, mate. You just got to stick at it now, and and again, the problem in England is the amount of criticism you always get, and it doesn't matter how hard you are around your edges. You feel that a bit, and Steve will be feeling it, but. As you know, he's a good man. He'll get on with it. Yeah.
Well, look, I've got a load of questions, and we are going to do it slightly differently. I'd love to have a long conversation, but some of these things might force other conversations off the back of it. I just wanted to ask, like, a genuine question. Like, how are you? Like, I saw you on TV at the weekend for the England-Ireland game, and you'll be on TV again this weekend as well. Like, firstly, how are you?
Well, I'm really enjoying Japan, mate. As hard as it is, It's a chance to really give back to the game, and I love the challenge of trying to create a team that in all respects physically can't compete with the big boys. Can we get back up there? So that's a really good challenge, and I'm enjoying that. Back in England for the week, it's been good, mate.
What about the stadium though? I want to go a little bit deeper into it, mate. You gave a lot to the game, and we know the English media, you've seen it in football. You saw it with Beckham. with what he did as England player against Argentina and the kind of backlash that you got. You've seen it with Wayne Rooney. You don't really see it in rugby, but you've started to see it now with the likes of Owen Farrell and yourself. Come on, give us a genuine thing. What's it like going back?
At the Viva on Saturday, the Irish were very polite.
The Irish were
very polite. So I'm expecting, knowing the English, mate, I expect them to be more polite on Saturday. If there's such a word.
But why are they like that with you? What do you think that it is? Because I can't wrap my head around it. You had such success with England. You're one of the most successful coaches, right? You don't need me to say that. You took them to a final of a World Cup. So, like, what's the issue? Genuinely, I'm keen to dig in. But we've had our apprenticeship.
I reckon there's a couple of things, mate. Firstly, I think being the first foreigner ever to coach English rugby. And English rugby, English rugby's not English rugby, it's RFU, isn't it? Which means they own the game. They own the game of rugby. And I think that's always been a contentious point, a foreigner coaching the English team. And I think secondly, when you're prepared to say what you actually think, there's times where probably I didn't say it as well as I should have. I remember once I got asked about the influence of public schools in England. And what I said was that, well, they're obviously a good influence, but, right, how can we make England stronger in rugby? And, of course, the headlines don't portray that. And that, and particularly in terms of English rugby, that upsets the establishment. And people only need a little divide and then there's opportunity for them to dig in. But at the end of the day, mate, I'm always grateful for the opportunity I had, and it's fantastic to be here for the week.
Yeah, and it shows that there is a tribalism, whether people like this or not. I know you're a football fan as well as I am, and I'm always, I wish rugby was a bit more like football. But there is a tribalism around their teams, or specifically in our sport, international rugby. So in a way, it's quite nice that there are these heroes, and you're a villain. I was a villain when I played. I'm now a hero, but I'm a villain as well, if I don't ask the right questions. But there's actually a dark romance in having that, you walking down the pitch side of a stadium which you've given your life and soul. You've also given your body. You played the game as well. But you know what I mean? That the second part of your career as a coach, like, you gave your life to that team and every ounce of energy that you had, and you're being booed.
But I reckon that's the great thing about the Six Nations, mate. That it's such an intense emotional setting. And, our game is the most intriguing game in the world, isn't it? You've got all these different contests, and then you've got when you get the right emotion where people love their team. Because I think most people in rugby love the game, and that's one of the things. You go to a stadium and everyone's polite. Well, you don't want that, do you? You want that fierce rivalry. But the great thing about our game always is, and I saw it at Ireland on Saturday, finish the game, you wouldn't know who's won and lost. The supporters all come out. They're in the bar having a drink afterwards. Some are a bit louder than others, but it's the distinct difference of our games that you can be hard and support the game, and then you can come off the field and it's like everyone's mates again.
Yeah, that's the tradition I do like, and that is what makes our game so special.
Yeah.
Like, wherever you go in the world, there's obviously a Lions tour going down to Australia. I know there's beef there, but it's not. There ain't violence after the game. You don't see that kind of stuff. South Africa, a little bit different. They can get a bit nippy. We can talk about them. But as I said, Eddie, look, we're going to do a slightly different show with this one here. And the reason is my mindset has changed a little bit from doing podcasts. So I had a guy called Adam Cattrall in the studio who sat in your chair, and he's one of the best UFC commentators. And I was talking about how the UFC is made up as a business, and he knows it inside out. He's mates with Dana White. He's interviewed Conor McGregor, John Jones, so some of the best athletes, right? And I was talking about how our game is struggling at the club game and struggling to find a little bit of identity and where we fit in with these other sports. So I asked him the question, I was like, how do the UFC do it? And he said it's a clear model in which they have around their business. And this is different to how I've always thought. I've always thought it's athlete first, pay the athletes as much as they want. They're the most important. But the UFC, and what Adam said to me was that it's actually the athletes are third in this whole model, that it is fans first. What do the fans want? What fights do they want? What merchandise do they want? And they will just dictate how the business looks for the sport. And then the business is wrapped around your likes of Monster Energy or Harley Davidson or Bud Light when they're trying to rebuild their brand, come back into the sport. Then the business is robust because they know that there's an engaged fandom there. Then the athletes will get paid. Do you know what I mean? So only then will the athletes get paid. And in our game, we're just, as you know, I don't want to go into the negativity of it. There's this big disconnection of like, what is first? Who matters most? Do you feel like the fans matter most?
Well, I think it's really interesting. I think once you go down that business model of, right, we're competing in an entertainment era now, aren't we? And sport's gone into that.
Sports, media, entertainment.
Yeah. So it's gone into that. So obviously the fans are huge now because the fans drive your sport, drive the number of sponsors that are interested in your sport. And for players, for rugby as a sport, you think about rugby was always a players' game, completely players' game. Amateur game, look after the players. But the connection between those three is going to have to change. And I think that's one of the interesting topics for rugby is international rugby's flying, absolutely flying. Like everywhere you go in the world, people want to watch their national team. And the rugby generally is outstanding, absolutely outstanding. But then you think about the next tier of rugby, which is the basis of the rugby, top 14's flying, and then probably there's no other competition in the world that would say, no, we're really healthy and really going well. So what do the fans want? Do they want that intense level of rugby, or do they want a free-flowing game? And that's the challenge, because you look at cricket, right? Cricket worked it out, didn't they? Keep the test matches, 5-day test matches. Then we create this 2020. Well, firstly, it was World Series cricket, coloured one-day cricket, coloured clothes,
crisps on the front, just edgier, but not edgier bands,
and make the players more like superstars. Treat them well, and now it's gone to 2020, and people love it, don't they? So cricket has worked out what to give them while still retaining, the jewel in the crown, which is a Test cricket.
And that is why I wanted to bring it up, because my mindset's changed on this as we watch the landscape of the club game. And I've got mates who are owners of the clubs and chatting to them, and we know there's conversations going around a merger and where does the EPCR and the Champions Cup now fit into the calendar, the fact that the South African teams are getting the best of all worlds, but yet they're struggling with fatigue, not just the players, but the coaches and everything around it. Whereas my mind is now, based on the fans, what do they want? They want international rugby. They want Six Nations. They want the championship. They want a World Cup. Do we do something like that every year? Do we have a cross-pollination of a super international cup every year? Because that would sell. You think if we do the Six Nations and the championship winner, and you do a one-off game and meet halfway, I don't know where, like whatever they decide to do, but the fans will tell you if they want it because they'll come and it will sell out.
Yeah, I reckon the solution is, and I'm not an administrator, mate, but I reckon shorter domestic competitions, like really good, intense, short domestic competitions. So say for instance, the English Premiership, you have 8 teams, right? Home and away, semi-finals, like NFL, 20-week season, right? And you sell that, you package it well. Then you've got another period of time now where you can create an entertainment form of rugby, which is like IPL rugby, whatever form that is. Like, I was involved in the 12s. We tried to get that off the ground, but didn't work. There'll be something that people want to see.
100%.
And I reckon that's the key for the game being healthy in the future.
Yeah, I didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole of trying to write on the back of a fag packet how we're going to do it. But I feel something's come in.
Yeah.
And my mind is now, and there's probably no better people to ask than people like you who have been involved in it for so many years. But I feel like there's something coming round. But the way that I'm looking at it is fans first. So that brings me on to some of the fans' questions that we can interact with. And I tell you what, I put out a couple of things on social media, and it's a different way to do things, but a load of them came back and they were very positive, like they genuinely were, and you get the odd ones and stuff. Andy Good, who sits there, was like, ask him about this, ask him. No, I would say I'm not. But anyway, Lock Horns with John asks, is the Prem as good as we think it is, or is it just highly competitive for like low-level teams? And basically, where does it rank? I think you've answered this with the top 14 Super URC, because this is the conversation in England now. Are England not very good because the Prem is this faster, less jeopardy game when they get to the international stage where jeopardy is so high and it's small margins and strategy? Where do you see things with the Prem?
Well, I think the Premiership's a good competition, mate.
Good?
Yeah, it's a good competition. I think, yeah, if I'm to watch a game of rugby, and if I want to relax and watch a game of rugby, I'll watch generally top 14 now. Second would be Premiership. Third would be URC. In that order. And I think if you think about it, Super Rugby was a jewel in the crown 20 years ago. It's what everyone watched.
Oh, I'm gutted that's gone.
Yeah,
Where's that gone how it was?
And now we don't have a competition there. And it can show you how quickly it can change because people want, and it goes back to what you're saying about fans, people want to see the best against the best. Like, that's what they want to see. And they want to see it underneath Test Rugby in a form that is slightly entertaining. You know, they want to see points in that competition. They don't want to watch a 12-9, 21-12. They want to see some action in the game. So the more we can create that action variation of Test match rugby, I reckon, for domestic comps, the closer we'll get to having a healthier game.
So you think the top 14's one?
Yeah.
The Prem's two, URC?
Premiership's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a good one. So Felix Burner, 2023, ask your thoughts on the English Premiership eligibility. So the England Premiership eligibility, actually. And should England players select outside of the Prem? So Jack Willis, Owen Farrell, Lewis Ludlam, Carl Sinclair, Courtney Laws, even though he's playing in Pro D2, Dave Ribbons. But this is a very topical thing, right? And because of how the Premiership and the club game has gone and the finances around the game, a lot of these players now are going, well, Jack Willis's arm was forced to go and play in Toulouse. He's gone so well there, he's been rewarded with the contract, but now closes the door on England. If you were to actually tell that to a fan from another sport, being like, we've got a back row, and you might not think he is, but we've got a back row who's probably one of the best back rows you could choose in England. He's playing with the very best team in the world, yet he can't play international. Give us an idea of where your thoughts are. If you were coaching England now, would you be like, I need him?
Well, you look at the most mature professional sport in the world, which is probably football, that they've got no qualms where they play in the world.
Old Jude.
Yeah, and because that's the best way to develop players. It's also the best way to develop players because you can bring young players through in your own competition, and then if they're good enough, they'll go overseas. So I think now the English Premiership has probably been right or England Rugby's probably been right in not allowing players to play overseas. But I think now, as the sport gets more mature professionally, they've got to let them go and they've got to be able to pick them. You know, and a player like Jack Willis, because at the end of the day, the only thing you've got to be worried about is a player getting better. And Jack Willis has definitely got better at Toulouse. Like, if he's not one of the best back rowers in the world now, then you and I probably aren't sitting in this room. It's AI, you know. He is exceptional.
Wow.
Yeah, he is exceptional.
Really,
and he
that
would
you're saying that?
Oh, well, yeah, I saw him come up and I was, picked him I think I might have picked him for his first test. And he was a good player, but nowhere near the player he is now. Yeah, you just look at him, his body's changed. And, you've played in France, haven't you? And it's tough, mate. Yeah, and if he doesn't play well, he doesn't get picked, right? So he's fit, his game's being exposed to a different game. I reckon if you just look at the simplicity of it, like did you watch Leicester Tigers play Toulouse?
Yes, I did, yeah. You say
everything was about Leicester, and they looked good, they were playing carrying clean, but everything was about the ball carrier creating a ruck. And everything in France is about the ball carrier keeping the ball alive, and that's changed Jack's game. Because he's much more agile on his feet. He's a much more dynamic ball carrier because he's thinking he's got to offload. Like 80% of the time we know it's going to be a ruck, or even 90%. But he's thinking like that, and his game's just really exploded, mate.
Yeah, that's really cool. So who's making that decision then? Will that come down? So if Steve turned around and said, right, we've got Ben Earl's injured, Tom Curry's injured, Ben Curry's injured, I need him. I want him now for Scotland. They just turn around and say, you can't have him.
Well, it's the RFU, but the RFU and the Premiership, because the Premiership don't want to lose their best players, which you can understand, because then if they lose their best players, then the markability of the competition goes down.
Yeah, but you can't pay your best players. This is the thing.
But I reckon the next step is let them go and produce better younger players.
That's what Scotland have done.
Yeah.
To a degree, some people might argue because we've got a lot of foreigners, but that's, Tom Jordan comes to Glasgow, does really well. People are annoyed that he's going to Bristol. Glasgow probably can't fit him within the cap. Bristol are going to pay his salary, decent tournament. They can bring the next, hopefully, Scottish player
and
to come through.
It's helped, like as we spoke about, mate, it's helped Scotland. It's helped Scotland get better, without a doubt. Finn Russell, again, mate, I reckon from him playing at Russing, has matured.
100%.
Matured. You just see him now. Again, different body shape, mate. He used to have that little gut, didn't he?
I still got that.
But it's not as pronounced now.
No, it's not.
He looks fitter, and he's definitely more consistent player.
But when you play him with them players, if you've got a Jack Willis, right, you're up against France this week, and when this is coming out after, right, Dupont, Intermac, I know he's not playing, but Ramos. Has Steve been on the phone to him? Has anyone been on the phone to him saying, mate, this is your country? Does he even want to give back to his country, when he's cast aside?
I tell you, mate, he'd give anything to play for England. I caught up to him in November, had a quick chat to him, and he wants to play for England. And I think it'll come. It's just a matter of when it comes. Like, you look at South Africa. South Africa got beaten by Japan 2015, 2016, changed their Curry Cup, move out of Super Rugby, go to URC, tell their players, play anywhere in the world you want to play, right? And they develop all these young players. Their best players are at good clubs because they're good players, and they get better. And I reckon for England, that's going to be the next step.
Yeah, I was watching the Lions. I couldn't believe how good they were. But they're homegrown talent, right?
Yeah.
And now what happens is the Prem, teams like Leicester, Sale, they'll be looking and being like, who are these lads playing at the Lions who are fucking balls? Yeah. And they'll be like, right, we'll sign them. And then they end up going, then they'll go back to a Sharks or a Stormers or something. Ryan Garr has asked, and we're flip-flopping here, I probably should have put these in order, around the Lions tour and the predictions for who wins that. Australia, much better. You're welcome, Australia, Eddie. That was a large part of you putting the foundations in. Like me for Scotland, I put the foundations in for them. We're decent now, but they're good now, Australia, whereas before...
I think they're on the way, mate. I think, Joe's done a really good job, probably suited him at that time.
Just re-signed?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hugely competitive. And you think about the four nations at the moment. Wales being as they are will really hinder the Lions, because the Lions, I'm sure, one of the most important things is a competition between the players, and then you bring them all together and you've got this fantastic group of players. But now you're basically, in a lot of ways, picking from three teams, unless Wales, then they got young players can find their feet in the rest of the tournament. It's going to be hard to pick, outside of Jack Morgan maybe. So I think the Lions are going to be really tested. And, it's different in Australia, mate. You're playing on hard grounds. It'll be a good test. I think it'll go right down the wire. It'll be a third test decider. The Lions might just get there.
That'd be really cool, the fact that it is competitive now. What about Joseph Sualihi? Am I right in saying that you were the one that identified him?
Yeah, the chairman and I. Hamish McClellan. We wanted to... Like, when I came back, rugby was at a low. Not that I helped it much, but one of the things we decided, we recruit the best young rugby player that was playing rugby league. So Joseph's a rugby boy he went to Kings, I think. Played rugby all the way through. Roosters got him on the contract. Played rugby league for 3 years, but he's just a beast, mate. An absolute beast. He will be... Or if he's not now, he will be the best aerial player in the world. He's 6'6", he's 102 Ks, he's got pace, he's aggressive, wants to win, and a great boy, like a fantastic boy.
Yeah, I heard him on a podcast in Australia, and he spoke about not drinking, about how professional he was, but just well made, just inside out, like a freak that you don't really see. And you mentioned that aerial ability. I remember Mark Nwangani-Tawase, who unfortunately has gone to leave. He was good in the air as well, wasn't he?
Fantastic, mate.
Yeah. Israel Folau as well.
And you think about the game at the moment, the aerial contest, particularly with the change in the escorting laws, he's going to be even more useful. We had the dinner we had with him at the chairman's to sign him. Just showed what a character he was. So he brought his parents and him came, and there was a couple of other people, and we ate dinner outside. Beautiful night in Sydney, He finishes his dinner, takes his plate and cutlery back to the sink. Like, no one told him to do it. He's just a really good kid. Really good kid. And he'll change the Australian side, mate. He'll change the Australian side.
Yeah, gifted.
And you know what it's like. You get one player like that comes in, the whole nuance of the team changes. So those guys who, are not at it, but could just give a little bit more, start to give it a little bit more, and the team changes, mate. And you saw that on the tour.
Yeah. I mean, with these players now, and they're superstars and they're redoing contracts and they're coming across from different sports. And I've got a bit of a bugbear around this because I saw Santi Carreras is leaving Gloucester to go to Bath. And I want to know what the deal is. I want to know how a player like that leaves Gloucester to go to his local rivalries. How much is he getting? Like what are the credits for the other players? And we're seeing that the NBA have just had the biggest draft shock with Dovic leaving Mavericks to go to LA Lakers, right. And all the media and the hype, and we know about the drafts and stuff like this, like Joseph Sualihi coming over, and it's rumoured to be like 5 million or 6 million. Why do we not talk about money in our game? Why do we not put a price tag associated with what you've just said is potentially one of the greatest athletes that we've seen in a long time playing our game?
I reckon, you talk about levels of professionalism, not allowing your players to play overseas. And I reckon the money's probably the last step, when money becomes open. At the moment, it's a secret. Oh, how much is Jim getting? No, I think he's getting this. Oh, well, I'm getting this, But when the game becomes truly professional, like, people don't worry about that, do they? You get paid what you're worth, and that'll come.
Do you think that'll come?
Yeah, 100%.
So you say that we're not professional now, then?
Oh, we're not professional in that thinking. We're still, everything's got to be a secret. And I think it's the same about injured players, mate. You talk about the fans. Everyone should know the status of a player, and in America, that's you have to, don't you? You have to put out an injury report. He's injured. How long? What sort of injury? And I reckon that's servicing the fans. Whereas at the moment, it's still a bit secret for rugby. But that'll be the next step, mate.
Yeah, because with Carreras going to Bath, I just want to know, like, why would you leave Gloucester? I know the reason why, because I know people at the club. And it isn't about Bath breaking the salary cap, but I'm like, how do you fit in Ben Spencer, Finn Russell, Ollie Lawrence, Joe Thokanasiga, Sam Underhill, Barbary, Maloney from Leinster to come in, Beno Urbano, you know what I mean? Dutoy. So you start marking it up, and then you talk about you've got Pepper from Newcastle that come, but there's a salary cap, and this is to me being I ain't bothered about the salary cap. It doesn't affect me, but I'm like, how, being an ex-Gloucester captain, have you got him? I want to know. I think the fans want to know that. So I think it's.
But again, mate, that sort of thing is a level of sophistication in rugby that'll come, and we should have it.
Fred has asked, who's challenged you most in your career, as a coach, in the media, or as a player?
Oh, Steve Larkham. Steve Larkham, brilliant player, but was always questioning everything you did and would want to know why. And in those days, I was talking to someone about it the other day, at the Brumbies, like on a Monday night, we'd sit around a table like this with the 5 or 6 senior players, and we'd spend 2 hours debating the game plan. Because they were educated guys and they knew the game. And he was relentless. Probably got an IQ of 150, like, bright guy. But he'd always be challenging, why are we doing this? Is this right? And if you got him on side, he was fantastic. But it took work.
What did you like in a player then? Because you speak to someone like James Haskell, and Chloe messaged me actually when I put it out there and said, thank you for looking after the girls. But clearly a guy that really liked you and enjoyed your company. And someone said to me what it was like with Eddie in Japan. I was like, I loved it. And people are quite surprised by that. But then you, as a coach, you would have players that you just don't like. And I had that as a player, Eddie. Vern Cotter just didn't like me. Mate, whatever it was, didn't like me. And that happens. That's life. Like, how do you manage that and the whole stuff around Danny Kerr, for example? I'm not saying you don't like each other, right? And I'm sure at some point there'll be a mutual respect, albeit he'll say he's lost £1 million. Like, how do you value someone like that?
Oh, I think the thing you always want, mate, one of the things I got taught very early as a coach was don't want to be liked by the players. Just make sure they respect you. And I've always just taken that line. I think, Yeah, but there's some players you gravitate to, you find it easier to talk to, and you tend to gravitate to those players. But you've got to try to be as fair as you can, and the players that you find a bit difficult. Like, it was interesting, the young fella out there, sorry, I've forgotten his name.
Alex, my agent.
Alex,
now,
yeah. So he's Ben O'Barner's agent,
Yeah,
right?
looks after Ollie Chesham as well.
And Benno was wanted to get in the England team, right? He was desperate to get in the England team. But he was overweight, mate. You know, and I remember we sat down in a cafe with Neil Craig, who used to be a high performance manager, and we had a chat to him, and yeah, it was because we couldn't get to him, you know, we couldn't change his habits. He was desperate to play, but he wanted to do all the good things in life. And I remember we said at one stage, said to him, he said, "So Benno, what do you like eating, mate?" I remember he leaned over and he said, "I love a hamburger." So we had a conversation. We said, "Right, no more hamburgers until you play for England." And when he got his first cap for England, I was so proud of him, mate. And, you know, you just got to find a way to communicate with players, and it's not always straightforward, but there's always a little gap there, and you're always just trying to find that gap to access their brain. And that conversation, like I had 10 other conversations with Benno about his weight, the S&C did, but no one could break it. And you just got to keep trying to find a way to access the players. And Danny Kerr, I still can't work it out, mate. Like, I thought we got on really well. But as I said the other day, I reckon most players, when you tap them on the back and say, "That's it," they don't have too fond of memories.
Yeah. And so with Danny specifically, because, I mean, that's the one where on ITV they asked you the question. It must have been short of time because he didn't push you. Mark Pujak didn't push you on the question at all. I don't know whether you said, you gave it one line. What did you say? Don't always believe what you read. But, but on the outside, I enjoy it. I enjoy them interactions. I enjoy seeing that there is a bit of beef, there is a bit of villain, there is a bit of niggle, you know. But with Danny, you don't know where it came from. I think because he was playing well for England, for Quins.
He was playing well, and we left him out in 2018 after we played Japan, where he didn't play well. And I remember the conversation. It wasn't a good conversation. It never is, mate, when you're telling a bloke he's not going to play. But then after that, we had further conversations. I can remember meeting him at Harlequins. But, you know, he's got that opinion. So
his argument would have been, and I've not read Danny's book, but I've been there as a player, where you get your opportunity against Japan. And you've not got Owen Farrell, you've not got Manu Tuolangi outside. You've got good players, but you've not been together, and you don't play that well. And that's the excuse, right? I've been there before. Like, Jim, you know well, Marcelo Lafreda, the Argentinian coach who came in, he says, "Jim, you know well, play well against the Irish." I didn't actually even play against London Irish. But it's, you know, you have your thing. But with Danny there, that would have been his argument. So when you see him now, would you say hi?
Yeah, no, mate, I loved him as a player. He was a good little player, good little guy. Yeah, we always talked about the fact, I remember meeting him down at Zizi's in St Albans.
Yeah.
I tried to sign him for Sarries when I was first there, and always admired him as a player, you know. And I think, you know, the good thing for him, he came back and played for England in the last World Cup and did reasonably well. So I'm sure that's healed the wound a little bit.
Yeah. I think we were talking about this in Japan, about managing these young men coming through now. And I'm a father of 4. I've got a 14-year-old lad. And you've been around the block, right? You mentioned Stephen Larkham there, one of the greats who have played the game. But the shift in the mind, and I know this because I've got mates who coach. I've got hard mates who coach. And he said a lot of the lads are soft coming through. I don't expect you to tell me that they are soft, but complexed, or there's a lot more to them when you're managing their mental health and their feelings. I imagine you're a straight shooter, right? You probably do like a bit of a few riddles now and then, but ultimately it'll come down to we're shooting straight here.
I think the big difference is now, mate, that instead of giving someone your opinion directly, like saying, "Jim, you're shit, mate. Like, you were shit yesterday. Like, what were you doing?" You know, you're saying, "Jim, you know, yesterday, do you think you put out your best effort? You know, is there anything you could have done better? So find me a few clips, bring it back, and let's have a look at it." And that's the difference in the approach, you know. And, you know, some coaches 20 years ago just tell you that and leave you with it. And that'd be enough for you to go away and fix it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas now I reckon the young guys need to be guided to that problem, because the education of the game generally is not as good, because they're in a YouTube life now, aren't they? They don't watch games of rugby. Like, I bet your 14-year-old probably doesn't sit down and watch games of rugby, but I bet he watches every YouTube
100%.
clips. So you've got to help educate them to look after their game more and be more responsible for their game. I don't think they're softer, because you think about all the social media stuff. Like, I don't look at social media at all. Since I've started doing the ITV, I've started reading, so I'm up to date. And the absolute tripe that's written, like, if you relied on that to form an opinion of yourself, you'd be a nutcase, wouldn't you? Like you're saying, like someone says, "Oh no, he's good. No, he's rubbish. He's good. He's rubbish." And if you're a young guy trying to work it out, and as you know, when you're 14 and 15, you're not real sure of yourself. That's difficult. And even your young professional player coming through 19 and 20, and you're reading this stuff, which they do read. We know they do read. And that makes it difficult for them.
Yeah.
So,
how was that as a coach when you'd see them on social media after?
Well, I just think it's an accepted part of the game now. Like, I spoke to an NBA coach, and he was saying that the team he was in at that time, they'd give them 5 minutes at halftime to check their phones. Seriously, because he said they've got to know what's being said about them. And then he said then they'd start their preparation for second half.
Can you say what team?
No, I'll be breaking confidence. Seriously,
Really?
And I don't think that's not commonplace, mate.
Yeah, but I think it's trying to manage it. I don't think people know how to deal with it.
Yeah, but you look at your phone and your face drops. Then I'm the coach. I'm saying, Jim, come on, mate. I still love you. Yeah. They might love you. I love you, mate.
I know. I remember we played against New Zealand, and my Uncle Hamish said, "You had a blinder." And I was like, we lost 48 points to 6, and people weren't happy on the streets. I got 3 out of 10 in the newspaper after. But it was the thing. I remember it did affect me.
See, you can still remember that, mate.
I can.
Right?
Yeah.
So imagine these young kids now.
I'd struggle if not now, not knowing what I know now. I'd say I was mentally weak. Yeah. Back then, I didn't work with psychology. I didn't have my dad. I didn't have parents growing up, so there's always that void. You're always looking for that reaffirmation. And me and Mark McCall actually had a few issues. And actually, this is what I think the issue was with me and Vern. So you would have seen me play the way that I played. I was quite physical, alpha, quite brash, bit of a joker as well. But I was actually very insecure. And I remember that, firstly on Vern, I think that he felt. He wanted me to be like Jamie Cudmore. So I think he wanted what was on the pitch, off the pitch as well. Like no nonsense where I wasn't. Yeah. Off the pitch I was completely chilled. I loved the lads. I loved the people. I loved the fans. But on the pitch I was a bit of a shit and a brute. And that was genuine, right? And some of it you had to put a bit of bravado on. But Mark McCall always said this to me, Eddie. He said, I just thought you'd be a bit different. And I said, in what way? And he was like, you have this persona on the pitch, but then off the pitch, you're a joker. And me and Owen Farrell didn't get on. Yeah. And it kind of stemmed a little bit from that. And I remember when we were skiing on one of these trips that the Sarries management used to wash money. We were on the skiing trip up in the mountains, and Mark was holding this big blow-up penis, and he just took me away in the corner, and we just had a conversation, right, amongst two men. He said that's what it was. He said, I thought you'd be the same as you are on the pitch, off the pitch. And he didn't like that. And he said, but you're doing really well for us, Jim. I said, oh, mate, really, do you think? And he was like, that's the one. I said, what? He said, well, I've just told you you're doing really well. You keep asking, like, you're looking for affirmation. He was right. I was 32 years old, seasoned international, and I was constantly looking for him to say that I played well. Yeah. And that's because there was a void. But that's the importance that you have as a coach, Eddie, because you like the dads. Yeah.
And again, mate, you still remember that conversation. And it gets back to, like, definitely coaching. Like, if I give the example of Haskell, right? I had the luxury of having lunch with Haskell in Tokyo when he was playing for Rico. So I got to know him a bit and sensed a bit about him. And I remember when I got the England job, right, he'd been in and out, hadn't had a good World Cup in 2015. One of the things I got him at the start of the campaign, I said, mate, you're playing every game in the Six Nations, right? I'm backing 100%. And you could see him, mate, like...
Leg was shaking.
Yeah, I'm ready. And he was unbelievable for us, mate. But if I hadn't had that luxury of having lunch with him and getting to know his personality, because they're the things you've got to pick up quickly. How can you access that player? How can you get a connection with that player? And the quality of your conversation stays with players for the rest of their life. If you have a good emotional conversation with a player, they remember that the rest of their life, and it helps them a lot, mate. You have a bad one, they remember it as well.
Well, there you go. I've given you two examples that I do think about
really good,
a lot.
Really good.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the RFU bonus and redundancies? I'd never normally do it in this cadence, Eddie, but they're there, so I thought I'll just mix it up. What are your thoughts on all of the chaos that's ensued around the English game and Bill Sweeney? He was texting me the other night. He said, "Oh, can I come on your podcast?" I said, "I'm not having sloppy seconds." I said, "You've already done the old one."
Look, I think it's a bad look, isn't it? You can't. No one can debate that. It's a bad look, but the timing of it, someone should have been smart enough. Like, he's probably due the bonus. I'm sure he is. They got a huge sponsorship at Allianz Stadium, so that's probably tied up in his contract. So get paid a year later, But the big thing, the RFU, whatever they do, they get criticised. Like, I had 7 years there. They're one of the best organisations I work for. They were really good, mate. And the amount of good work they do in the community is never sold to the media, because people don't want to know about that. They do a lot of good stuff, and of course they get criticised. And Bill's getting punished because he cut the championship funding, and they're after him now, mate. And
give me some examples of some good stuff that's happening. And I'm asking this as a genuine question.
I just think, mate, the development of coaches. They've gone up and down with funding, but generally they've been really good. They look after you. Go around to a local club in England. They're well funded, like much better than anywhere else in the world. Much better than anywhere else. They've got a clubhouse. They've got generally reasonably training facilities for community clubs is pretty good. And you think of how much England put into that. Post the World Cup in 2015, I think they put in a number of artificial turf grounds. So the coaching, the support of the community clubs, I think, is pretty good, and it's relatively healthy.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'd go, again, based on social media, not speaking to anyone deeply in the RFU, but I'd be keen to chat to Bill at some point. But my listenership's actually a lot younger than you think. My listenership, I saw this thing on social media, you look at your insights. I don't know if you are on social media or you're not, but the insights will tell you what your audience. Mine's young. Mine's like 18 to 25. That's cool, eh? We're trying to engage younger audiences. So.
Fans, mate. You got the fans in the right spot.
Exactly. So we need to start monetising it now. That's for sure. Here we go. Should we ask this one? I didn't ask this one when we were in Japan, but everyone's asking about it. This is the most common question. Which one am I going to ask? What is it? Did you or didn't you take the job whilst contracted to Australia Rugby with Japan? So with this one here, this is how I ask a question, but I can't give my opinion on it. The media obviously went nuts. They almost went. This is how it looked to me. When Lance Armstrong was clearly cheating, and Paul Kimmage and all of them things. I'm watching. I went back and watched them press conferences just randomly because I like Paul, and we've done some interviews, and he wrote my mate's book. And the energy in that press conference there with a guy that is clearly cheating and doping, it felt like it was similar to the wolves and the hyenas. I like wolves and hyenas for all the media guys listening. But is there any part of that where you can see why people were annoyed? Because there was obviously conversations ongoing. You were future-proofing yourself or not. I don't know. Well,
there's a couple of things. Firstly, I can categorically say I hadn't signed for Japan, and that there was no guarantee I was getting the Japan job. The situation with Australia, I signed for 5 years, made a commitment, but it was based on the fact that we could fund a change in the structure. If I look at Australia now, they're doing a little bit better, but they're not going to do a lot better until they start bringing the talent through properly. And it's like, if you look at Wales now, like how can a country like Wales, like in all seriousness, be 13th, 12th or 13th in the world? Like they're one of the great rugby countries. But that's what happens when you don't look after your development system. So we had agreement on what was going to be done. They had to get, they promised me they'd get the funding to do it. Post the World Cup, we had a discussion. They said, no, we haven't got the funding. We went back with a second proposal about how to do it a different way, slightly abridged way. Can't do it. So they broke the contract. And it goes people don't realise it goes both ways. It goes both ways. They provide a contract and they've got to fulfil their part of it, and I've got to fulfil my part of it, which is winning, right? And so neither of us were doing it at that stage. So I felt it just wasn't a good fit. So then I decided I'd apply for the Japan job.
Yeah, so that press conference, remember David Parecki, who I was at Sarries with, couldn't hit a barn door, and it was great to see him go on and do really well for Australia. Great lad,
no, he's a good fella.
But you can see his face. Like, how were you in that discussion? I would have been melting, Eddie, and this is where, like, you might be slightly sociopathic, and you probably have to be a coach. How uncomfortable did you feel? Was that the most uncomfortable you felt, or not at all? Because you could see Parecki was, I mean, obviously he just lost, right? So it's going to feel like that. But that looked like maybe your most uncomfortable time.
Yeah, I think back on it, in some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. I still feel like I acted with integrity. So that's the only thing that matters, mate. And others can judge how you do it. But in the world of sport, mate, everyone's talking to everyone all the time. Like, imagine how many discussions are going on about the Wales job now, the England job. Like, they're all ongoing. Like, people can say they're not, they're not meeting, they're not talking, but they are. They have to be. And that happens all the time. And I've never been in a job where someone's not talking about another job. Like, and if people say that doesn't happen, then you're really not being real.
I don't know if Ireland are talking to anyone else, Eddie.
Probably not.
They want to keep Andy Farrell. But on the England stuff, I'd be really interested to get an honest take on this, because they're under pressure. England are. And if we think, and they might beat France, and well done to England if you've beaten France when this comes out. But is Steve under RFU pressure, or do you think he's going to be given a lot of time? Because this is what we go back to when we started. You've got the 4 teams that are split apart from the rest. What can he do, and how much pressure is he under?
Well, I think when you're the England coach and you're not winning, you're always under enormous pressure. Whereas, we've seen with Wales, there's more latitude for people there, but in England, you don't get the latitude. So he's under pressure. But when he got the job, he knew that was going to be the case. I think what they should do is they should say, Steve, you got the job till 2027, right? Get your right coaching staff in, right? And then give me a plan of how you're going to select going forward. What do you think the team is? And then endorse him 100%. And they need to find that point of difference in their game. Like, either become a really strong kicking game and defence-based team, and then be able to counter-attack, which I think they showed in the first half against Ireland, but weren't able to sustain it. And I think one of the reasons, they've definitely got a capacity problem, a physical capacity problem, and an emotional capacity problem in being able to sustain that effort, and he's going to have to build that up over a period of time.
And a leadership problem, do you believe? Because I know you made the comments around Marrow, but I played with Marrow, and there was a part of me, I was like, you know what, I agree. Just because you're a world-class player doesn't mean you're a world-class leader. It'd be interesting to see how he carries that through. He's a great front man, like aesthetically looks great for the team, but they've clearly got a leadership problem.
Well, I think they need to support him. Like, if he's going to be the captain, then support him to be the best captain. What's the number 2? I was just thinking, like, in the period I had Dylan and then Owen Farrell as second, mate. That was a great combination. Dylan, good people person, people's at the table, get them together. Owen's barking at them, telling them what to do. And, in essence, that's what you want in a team, don't you? You want someone who gets them together and someone who's really hard on standards. And they probably don't have that at the moment. Then we went through a period where it got a bit murky. Owen was the captain. We didn't really have someone underneath him to do the cohesive part. And then we had Courtney and Owen together, which was, again, almost like a dream leadership team. Courtney good at bringing people together, you know, always relaxed, last minute, you know, nothing's too much. And then Owen, again, is the same barking person. So if Murray, and I'm not sure which type Murray's going to be, you know, whether he's going to be that inclusive, get people together, or he's more the hard nose. You know, I think
Does he need to be one?
Well, I think he needs to get good at one of them, because I don't think you can be everything. It's really difficult to be everything. And, you know, most good teams have a leadership group. There might be one person at the top, but they have a leadership group that handles all the areas of building a good team.
You mentioned Steve getting the right coaches around him, and there's been a lot of changes in the coaching setup. You had a similar thing where a lot of coaches came and went. What was that down to? Because Steve didn't go with you, like he stuck with you, you know? And
well, up until 2020, we had a really stable coaching team. You know, Steve was a significant assistant coach. He went to Leicester. Post that, struggled to get the right people, mate. Sometimes you just struggle to get the right people. And I made a few judgment errors, and it cost you, mate.
Yeah, because Steve's had that as well, though, hasn't he? And that's been a big... You don't really see it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And the other thing, mate, you know, and you'll know better than anyone, Jim, some players adapt really quickly to be international players. Some coaches adapt really quickly because it's completely different sort of coaching. Like, you know, you get England in, you get Scotland in, you got 4 days before you go into Test week. You know, and you've got to, in that period of time, you've got to instill a system. You've got to develop relationships. There's a completely different sort of coaching. Whereas at club level, you can do that over a 6-week period, you know, and the boys are in all the time. There's less pressure to win. So it's a completely different kettle of fish. And sometimes really good coaches don't adapt to that international coaching. And some, you know, not so good club coaches become fantastic international coaches.
What's the difference between a World Cup winning coach and nearly teams? And you've been a part of both. What is that extra little bit? Why is South Africa so good at the minute? There's no better man to reflect. 2 World Cup finals, a World Cup winners medal with South Africa. It's 3 finals, wasn't it?
If I look at it, like just from my own point of view, Australia in 2003, we played above ourselves. England 2019 at the final. At the World Cup, I think we played above ourselves. At the final, we played below ourselves. So that gap there is the one that still intrigues me. You know, I still think about what I could have done better. But I think winning a World Cup is about, like, if I could nominate, it's about having 5 players that are all excellent in their area, that want to work together, got a bit of hardness about it, that sit down with the coaching staff and you work together and you just keep doing it.
Yeah. So on that, before we go ask every guest, we did this in Japan, just be quick with it, about whose goats are these. So the 3 best players you've seen, you've coached, you want to coach, ever to have played the game.
Number 1, Free Dupree, South African halfback. Saw the game through Ruxpert before everyone else. Incredible player. 2, Larkham as a 10. Revolutionised the game. Running 10, long pass, short pass, and could kick a drop kick. I think he only ever kicked 1 field goal, and that won a World Cup. Like, that's different. 3rd, probably George Smith, mate. Complete opposite. Loved a good time, you know, but was just turned a tiny, fat little body into a champion player. The
great Eddie Jones. You see what we've done with this interview? We've left people wanting more. You know what I mean? We've left them wanting more. Excellent. So I'll get you back in the studio, mate. It was so cool to have you.
Good on you, Jim.
Legend, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks very much.
Right. That's all Eddie Jones wrote. Thanks to everyone who's tuned into the show so far. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. But the main one is the podcast channels, because it's a podcast first. And the main podcast channel, as you know, I'm sat here in the studio now, is Spotify. Big thank you to everyone again. Big thank you to Eddie. Hello, boy. Be cool.